Welcome on Texas football, state of the program. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Gerry Hamilton. Gerry, it's time for this week's state of the program. We waited a day for this so that we could hear Steve Sarkisian speak yesterday, hear Sam Pitman this morning as well. I tell you what, major takeaways this week. We've talked about those on Coffee and Football. We've talked about them ad nauseum through this whole year. About the SEC. What have been your impressions about Texas going to the SEC this week here at the Omni in Dallas?
I'll say this, Bobby. I think what you said on Coffee and Football this morning was true. There's now a third team that's hated as much as Alabama and Georgia in the SEC, and that's Texas. And they haven't even played a game. Now, part of that was, look, they beat Alabama last year, go to the college football playoff, right? So now they enter the SEC, but they enter SEC as not only a really good football program, obviously, but the best college athletics program in the country. That adds to the vitriol, right? Everybody wants to beat Texas at something. And I thought the media swarm around Quinn Ewers yesterday was the most for any player that's been put in front of the media. I just think the walking around, it's interesting. You know, on day one, I heard a couple of radio guys outside the state of Texas say Texas is riding into the SEC on their high horse, thinking they're going to come in and dominate the conference, win the conference year one. You hear Nick Saban on ESPN the last 2 days talking about, you know, for people that think Texas is going to come in here and dominate and win the SEC, it doesn't work that way. It's the toughest conference in the country. You can get tripped up at any time. And we said it on Coffee and Football this morning that the last 16 seasons at Alabama for Nick Saban, the greatest run in the history of the SEC, he only went undefeated in the SEC play 6 times. So 10 years, he lost a game. So I think was one of my takeaways. And from a Sark perspective yesterday, Bobby, he said it's the most talented team and best team he's had at Texas. That's a mouthful coming off the college football playoff where you're a play away from playing for the national championship. The most talented part's backed up by Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl, him saying there's 12 Texas players with draftable grades headed into the season. That's more than last year. And he had a Jermaine Lolay on that list. So it's a couple of transfers out of the portal on that list. And then there's the confidence Sark had in Quinn Ewers yesterday. I thought was really interesting, Bobby, because he said he walks into the facility like the starting quarterback of a team with high expectations. He did not say that last year. That was a major takeaway from me.
I look at it, Gerry, and I'm a little bit different in a couple of different ways. I want to talk about that. The rebuttal that Steve Sarkisian had yesterday to folks who talked about Texas is coming in on their high horse. Sark didn't shy away from that, actually. No. He literally said, you know what? We're not only coming to the SEC, we're not just happy to be here. We're coming in an attempt to win championships. And you know what? He said that not only about football. He even said, look, that's what the standard is for the University of Texas. And so I think a lot of teams say, oh, they're coming in on their high horse. Look, Texas is going to try to win. They're not just happy to be here. And I think that's really, really big piece of the puzzle when you talk about a mentality. You're talking about earlier when you first mentioned that there's a news article in the Knoxville News Center up at the University of Tennessee's home newspaper, so to speak, that there's a new team besides Georgia and Alabama for SEC fans to hate. Well, apparently that's Texas. I'd also throw Florida in there, by the way. Yeah. There's like a haves and have-nots in this league, and I think Texas, Florida, Georgia, Alabama are going to be those teams long term. The piece of it that's interesting to me is how Texas doesn't mind that. they want to try to embrace it, just like they did last year, embrace the hate, right? But Texas now is in a team of a lot of like-minded peers, whereas before it was really just Texas and OU that were in that same kind of dominant mind space or head space, for lack of a better term. All right, I've got a couple more questions that we're going to go over and talk about here with Gerry. But first, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, each and every state of the program, brought to you by our friend Adam Lowy at the Lowy Law Firm. Adam and his team help people that have been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, including motorcycles, ATVs, etc. Reach out to Adam and his team at loweylawfirm.com. That's loweylawfirm.com. Adam and his team will try to help you out. Adam also supports the University of Texas. He's in the basketball arena. You can see him spending his hard-earned money in the basketball arena supporting the University of Texas. So we appreciate Adam and his sponsorship of On Texas Football. All right, Gerry, the next piece that I want to get to with you is recruiting. And we always try to talk a little bit of recruiting here because we feel, you and I both feel, that recruiting is the lifeblood of any college football program. Texas right now is in mid-July officially. They're at 15 commitments. They have roughly 9 guys left on the board, right? How many do you think of the guys out there right now that Texas really stands a great shot of adding to this class prior to their senior year? So that takes away somebody like Nick Brooks, who is going to announce in September. So there's really 8 guys left on the board. We're looking at August 30th when Jamie French announces. How many guys do you think will really be committed to Texas at that time if they're at 15 right now?
Odds have gone up on Khalif Lockett since DeCorian Moore committed to Oregon. It's kind of why I was took the stance of on Texas Football here or .com that Texas wouldn't get 3 5-star ranked receivers in the same class. I was told multiple times DeCorian Moore and Khalif Lockett would not end up at the same school. I wasn't going to say that publicly. That's what I was told behind the scenes. So I think when DeCorian Moore committed to Oregon, the chances for Texas and Khalif Lockett went up. And I think A&M and Alabama's solid competition there. So I think those odds have gone up. I think Texas remains the nice leader for Jamie French over Tennessee ahead of a Georgia visit last weekend in July. I think Michael Terry, I think Texas has. The odds have gone up a little bit in the battle with Oregon. We'll see which way that goes early August to beat the Texas pool party late July. I think A&M's 3rd, Nebraska's 4th in that one. So you look at that, then you say Nathan Tillman, we're waiting on him this week. I think that's Texas or Utah. I don't want to rule out TCU, but I think one of those two is most likely. Not saying he can't go to TCU. So let's just say there's 3 schools in it. DJ Sanders, total wild card recruitment. Texas A&M, may visit Michigan again. We have an uncle that lives up there. So I think, and I do think Texas leads for Nick Brooks. So I'm going to that's going to be a September decision, so before October 1st. But I think then there's Michael Fasusi, who I think Oklahoma has some confidence with. I think Texas is right there in the battle, though, however. So I think both those teams could win out for Fasusi, and I think A&M is the number 3 team there. Madden Faramo will announce in August, probably Notre Dame or Texas. Notre Dame's had a lead for a long time, but Texas has cut into that on that official visit and thereafter, else he'd have already committed to Notre Dame. So it's a real decision. So I think Texas is in a good spot for French, at least 50-50 shot for Lockett, at least 50-50 shot for Terry, close to a 50-50 shot for Fasusi. So those 4 highest ranked guys on the board right now, I think Texas, if Texas I think will get 2 of those 4 I mentioned. On that other question, they get 3 of those 4. And if they do, they're inside the top 10 in the class rankings headed into the season. And you know that this time last year, there was no Brandon Baker, Ryan Wingo, Kobe Black, Phil Simi, Wardell Mack was committed to Florida, Tyante Smith was committed to A&M, and Aaron Butler didn't have an offer. So you know this class is going to get bigger and better during the season. They got to fill needs at defensive line and defensive back. But I do think class rankings-wise, I think they're going to win out for some of these guys. How many, we'll see. And I think they'll be a top 10 class headed into the season.
All right, Gerry, I think that all makes sense. My take on all of this at this point in time is we're really seeing Texas try to get down to the nitty-gritty of recruiting. I mean, we're now with 9 guys really left on the board before they go back and really check in on guys their senior year. If they add 3 or 4, they'll be at 18 or 19 commitments of the 22 or 23 they're probably eventually going to get to. So they'll almost be done with recruiting for this cycle. Now, not completely, because I mentioned Nick Brooks, he carries into September, et cetera. But over the next month, that's going to happen. I want to go next to this. Sam Pitman today. It was very interesting. Yesterday, Steve Sarkisian made the comment that it's almost like Arkansas hates themselves hates Texas more than they like themselves. Sam Pitman this morning was asked about that. And he goes, well, when we played them a couple of years back, and this is direct quote, it was the most excited our fan base has been in a while. So I would say he's probably right. That's coming from the Arkansas head coach. Jerry, one of the things about moving to the SEC that Steve Sarkisian's mentioned, Chris Del Conte's mentioned, et cetera, is the renewal of rivalries. And Mike Elko's talked about it, all of them. How much does that impact recruiting? Like, does Texas A&M, the absence of that rivalry, the absence of Texas-Arkansas, I think, has hurt Arkansas's recruiting in the state of Texas. We've seen that. Has that absence of Texas A&M hurt Texas recruiting over the last 10 years, in your opinion? And do you think it'll help as we go forward?
I absolutely think it's hurt, and I absolutely think it helped both programs. And we talked about this with somebody the other day, and we've talked to so many people, I can't remember who it was. You may remember who it was, Bobby. It was an interview I had with Duke Thomas. Okay. Duke Thomas came out of Copper's Cove. He went to games at Texas A&M versus Texas because A&M was recruiting him earlier. And then he talked about that game was influential in his decision to stay in state. He turned down a phone call and a visit to Alabama to go to Texas. Now, Alabama wasn't Alabama at the time, right? But they were still really good. They had won a national championship, but it was pre-dynasty, truly. So Duke Thomas talked about that as a recruit, firsthand experience with that. I do think, when A&M moved to the SEC, what was the talk in the state of Texas? A&M just opened up the state of Texas to the SEC in recruiting, and it was 100% spot on true. And the reason it was really opened up more so, though, than the move to the SEC is because A&M and Texas stopped playing the game. So these kids have not experienced that game. They haven't experienced going to that game and seeing the magnitude of an A&M versus Texas game in College Station or in Austin. These kids in the 27, 28, 29 recruiting classes, they will get to do that this year in College Station. I think that is major in recruiting in the state of Texas. And I do think it's helped out-of-state programs come into Texas and get more guys. Now, is Texas and Texas A&M ever going to keep all the top 10 players in the state? No. Those days are over. It's not happening. I say it all the time. Kirby can't even keep all the top guys in Georgia, and he's lost 2 games in 3 years. But I do think this game coming back, that rivalry, it'll be talked about in high school locker rooms. It's talked about on text message chains with all these kids. It hasn't been talked about in their lifetimes. That is going to have a positive impact on recruiting. But I say that with a caveat, only if these teams are good. And I do think we're headed to an area, Bobby, where both of these teams are going to be good because they're both well-equipped to compete in the NIL era.
Well-equipped to compete in NIL, Jerry, as well as, I think Mike Elko is going to be a good coach for the Aggies. I do. And I think I don't know if Steve Sarkisian has this program on rails or just on a really good path, but it's close. I'll put it that way. So I feel like Texas is definitely on the right path. The other thing I want to say about the rekindling of rivalries, whether it's Arkansas or A&M, et cetera, when I was growing up, there were 2 games that were played in the state of Texas every year that were the 2 biggest college football games in the state of Texas, period, each and every year. Now, every so often there might be a non-conference game. Like this year, A&M's got Notre Dame at home, right? So that's going to be a different one. That it may be one of the bigger games in the state this year. But I look at it, Jerry. Texas plays OU in Dallas every year, and then Texas A&M play home and away every single year. Those two games will be the biggest ticket for everybody, every recruit in the state of Texas. Those two games, Texas OU and then Texas A&M, each and every year. Period. End of story. That wasn't the case. Texas OU was one of those, right? That granted. But I go back to it, and I feel like Texas lost that second piece of the puzzle when they did not when A&M decided to go into the SEC. So I think it's a big deal in recruiting. I think it's a change back to what we were accustomed to as far as me growing up. I mean, now we have a new generation that doesn't even remember this. I mean, it's been 13 years. The lost generation, I guess it can be called nowadays. But I think it's going to impact recruiting. I think it's going to impact college football in the state of Texas. I think it could potentially, make some of these guys that are leaving the state less likely to leave them, because now they're seeing 2 games a year that are that nationally televised, et cetera, as opposed to just one-offs. They'll choose Texas or Texas A&M more frequently as opposed to looking to go elsewhere.
I want to say something about Sam Pittman's comments today too, because this is where I think, overlooking teams in the SEC is dangerous for the Texas fan base. Arkansas, they have an embattled coach. You don't know if he's going to be the head coach there not next year. They don't have the expectations to compete for an SEC championship or a college football playoff this year. So how much does that Texas game mean to Arkansas? It means everything to Arkansas this year. That is the thing in the SEC. Yes, Iowa State wanted to beat Texas. It's different than going to play in Fayetteville, especially an Arkansas team that doesn't have expectations like a Texas, a Georgia, Alabama, and LSU, Missouri even. So that is actually their Super Bowl. And what Sam Pittman's quote, I think, is 100% correct. And that is, here's the thing with the SEC, is you look at that at the end of the year, and what are those last 4 games? It's after a bye week, right? You have Georgia at Vanderbilt bye. Then you go to Florida, Kentucky, Arkansas, Texas A&M, and I may be wrong in that order. But Florida may be a wounded team looking to save their coach's job. Arkansas may be the same exact thing, and that's their Super Bowl. Kentucky may be looking for that one season-defining win, and then you have A&M, which is going to be straight vitriol. The SEC is different because those teams, whether Arkansas is 4-8, or 7-5, is going to be in a lot of spots more talented than an Iowa State team that won 7 or 8 games in the Big 12. Kentucky has multiple NFL draft picks coming on defense and a wide receiver that's one of the most underappreciated in the country. Obviously, Florida's a talented roster, but maybe not as talented as Florida, Alabama, Georgia, LSU at this point. But those games, those 3 games in a row, I think right now, the Texas fan base looks at them as 3 wins. Florida, it's going to fire Billy Napier. Sam Pittman, he's going to get fired. And Kentucky's good, but how good are they? The difference in the SEC, and this is what Nick Saban was talking about yesterday. Nick Saban said there's a lot of arrogant fan bases in this conference. You aren't going to come in and dominate this conference. So I think the fan base, it's great to be excited. And I love the excitement. I'm all for it. I think this is the best thing to happen for Texas football. But I think there's the realization there, Bobby, that these games are going to be tougher than I think what a lot of people think right now.
I think that's a good way to put it, Jerry, overall. All right, I want to say thank you to our sponsor one last time before we have one final topic for you guys. Our sponsor is Adam Lowy of the Lowy Law Firm. He's been helping injured Texans for more than 2 decades now. They're in the Austin area, but he goes around the state. Please give me a shout, loweylawfirm.com. If you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, give Adam and his team a shout. They will give you a free consultation, let you know whether or not they think you might be due some level of compensation. All right, Jerry, last comment I have, and this is something that Steve Sarkisian said yesterday. First practice, July 31st. Dude, it is right. It is 2 weeks from yesterday until they get on the grass and are going at it each and every day. What are you looking forward to the most? I mean, what's your thought process of that first day coming up 2 weeks from yesterday?
Well, the fan base will be asking about what does Sadir look like physically? What does Cam Williams look like physically? Is he really 335 pounds? They'll be talking about that, the look physically of the players and the team. You know me, Bobby. I'm going to go watch Michael Kern punt the football because look, I'm going to be real right now. One of the question marks with Texas that can impact a win or loss this year is there's interior D-line, right? There's the right side of the offensive line. How are they going to be in pass pro year one working in tandem together with 2 young football players on the offensive line in terms of starts in college football, cornerback and defensive back in coverage. And then the other one's punter. Ryan Sanborn was a good punter. And what people, I think, need to understand why I'm going there is when you have a 20, 25-minute media window session, you get to watch the players walk in. We watch them do some positional drills, and then you see a lot of special teams. Because Sark isn't going to go out and start running plays with all of us there. What does Michael Kern look like? Because that's an unknown with this team right now at punter, and it can win you a game, and it can definitely lose you a close game. Ryan Sanborn was dependable, consistent. He's in an NFL training camp for a reason. Now you have a couple of guys that were walk-ons in the program that I think are power 4 or 5 level punters, unproven. Now you have a freshman who Texas thought enough of that they didn't go to the portal for that guy, Bobby, for a guy that puts a lot of pressure on an incoming freshman. We know Texas has a lot of talent. We know they're going to be a really good team. So obviously, since they give me special teams, after I look at what these guys look like physically, I want to watch the special teams, and I want to watch the punter, and I want to see if we have an answer at that position.
I think you answered the first part of it the way I would. Actually, it's body composition of the guys that I'll say this: it doesn't have to be Cameron Williams or Sadir Mitchell, the bonus size guys. I remember 2 years ago, after Barron Sorrell's first year as a starter, or not as a starter, but he played a lot as a true freshman. And I came back the second year, and man, he just looked like a totally different guy. I wasn't expecting that from Barron Sorrell. Could be somebody else. It could be a Jalen Gilbo that looks different. Now, I don't know. I think your idea of who passes the eyeball test, and by doing that, by the way, you can tell how serious some of those guys take the sport and what it's going to take to succeed in the off season. You know, there's an old saying, champions are made in the off season. That's what I think we'll see a little bit of how the Longhorns team look on that July 31st day. All right, that's going to do it for the state of the program. Thank you again to Adam Lowy, our sponsor at the Lowy Law Firm. For Gerry Hamilton, I'm Bobby Burton. Thanks also to our guys here who have been here all week with us, Cody Clearman, CJ Vogel, as well as John Burrows, our intern. From the Omnia Hotel, this has been State of the Program. Hook 'em.